Do you accept the coaster challenge? Yes, I accept the coaster challenge. Do you accept the coaster challenge? Coaster Challenge podcast is here. It's time to face your fears. Get that theme park therapy and let us go through. Coaster Challenge podcast is here. Your fear can disappear. We know that theme park therapy can dry up all your tears. Do you accept the coaster challenge? Yes, I accept the coaster challenge. Do you accept the coaster challenge? We accept because you know we're not average.
You're listening to the Coaster Challenge podcast. A journey where people become fearful to fearless, all from riding roller coasters. So please secure your hats and glasses and keep your hands and arms inside the podcast. It's time to accept the Coaster Challenge with your hosts, Andrew Locke.
Hi, everyone. This is Andrew, one of the producers of the Coaster Challenge podcast. Throughout the history of this podcast, we've had as guests various types of people who work in the theme park industry, whether it be people that either work for the parks or perhaps even the ride or coaster manufacturers. We've had quite a few guests across the board. Today, we have a very unique guest, though. Our guest is a college professor who teaches his students about theme parks and coasters. Welcome to the podcast, Professor Roller Coaster, Marin Lewison. Hi, Martin. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Absolutely. We're proud to have you, and given your story, which we'll be, of course, having you share with us today with the greater audience here at Coaster Challenge. I think it's a great story, and I'm excited to talk to you. I think it'll be a fun conversation. So speaking of that story, why don't we start off with you just telling us about yourself and about your love of parks and coasters and how that relates to what you do for work and so forth.
Sure. Well, I mean, going back to the beginning, I grew up in New Jersey, and I have memories of mostly my earliest memories would be Palisades Park, which used to sit on the sort of border between Fort Lee and Cliffside Park in Bergen County in New Jersey. So I know my older sister took me there a few times. I think I might have gone to a friend's birthday party. That kind of thing when I was really little. And I also remember, my mom grew up in Danbury, Connecticut, and every autumn my mother would take us up to the Great Danbury State Fair. So we'd visit the grandparents and spend at least a weekend at the fair. And I just loved the fair, and I still do love fairs, and I go to a lot of fairs still. And then of course I went to all the other New York City area parks like Playland. My sister took me to Coney Island in Brooklyn when Astroland was still there. And then, of course, Six Flags. Well, actually, before it was Six Flags, Great Adventure opened in Jackson, New Jersey. So I visited Great Adventure before it was Six Flags. And then, of course, after Six Flags bought the park, I went to Six Flags, Great Adventure. So I grew up at that park. And then my family was not like my dad. My dad was like really square, so my dad was not into theme parks or anything like that at all. So I would, really, I only went to these places when it was on like a school trip or a camp trip, or when it was like, the fun cousins, fun aunts and uncles. And so they would take me to Great Adventure. And they would take me, they took us to Disneyland in Florida, Disney World in Florida. So I managed to get to Disney World, Magic Kingdom when it was, pretty new, still in the early 70s. And, I was still a little kid. And then when Epcot opened in the early 80s, I had family take me there as well. So I got to see both of those places when they were still, pretty young. So that's sort of how I got into it. I remember my 8th grade, school trip was to, Washington, D.C., and you go to George Washington's estate and Mount Vernon and stuff like that. Right. And we also made stops at King's Dominion.
Oh.
And also at Busch Gardens in Williamsburg. And I fell in love. I rode the I rode the Loch Ness Monster 22 times in a
Wow.
single day. This was when I'm in eighth grade. So what are you like? You're 14, I guess. So
Right.
I had such a great time. And so I always loved theme parks and roller coasters, and I didn't get to go much because my immediate family, other than my older sister, who eventually, went away to college, and so she wasn't taking me around anymore because she was much older. Anyway, so I kind of didn't get to go a lot. And then, then I went to college, and that was like time to grow up and get serious and stuff like that. And right around the time I was in college, I think it was 87, 86, 88. Like, so I was in college in the mid 80s, and Six Flags Great Adventure had a horrible fire. It was the haunted castle fire,
Yep.
and I don't like it was pretty traumatic. Like, I don't know, at least 10 or 15 teenagers died in a
Yeah.
horrible accident. And of course, the lawsuits went on for months, for years. And I kind of thought, I don't need to go to theme parks anymore because, maybe they're not such safe places. So I sort of put that stuff aside and really stopped thinking about theme parks and roller coasters altogether. And then this changed. So I got two more chances. I went to graduate school in Pittsburgh, and I happened to start dating this woman who was a huge Disney fan, big Disney World fan. She was a big Kennywood fan. So
Hmm.
Kennywood's the amusement park in Pittsburgh, and
Of
Kennywood's
course.
just such a great park. And I mean, this was back when the original families still owned the park. This was before Parques Reunidos and Palace Entertainment took over. So I mean, I think the character of the park has changed somewhat. But
Yes. Agreed.
so yeah, I mean, yeah, yeah, we can have a whole show about that, right?
Oh
Um,
yeah.
yeah. So she really got me to appreciate Kennywood and these old Woodies. And I was like, this is great. This is, I remember how much I love this stuff. And with her, that was the first time I ever like got in a car and like drove away, drove somewhere to go to theme parks other than like the family trips. So,
Right.
so we went to Ohio, of course. If you're in Pittsburgh, you go to Ohio.
Sure.
And of course, we went to Cedar Point, and we went to Paramount's Kings Island at the time, and went to SeaWorld, Ohio, which, a lot of people don't even know existed, but it
Right.
was actually the second SeaWorld after the one in San Diego. And SeaWorld, Ohio didn't have any coasters, but it was still just wonderful visiting that park. It was so well taken care of. This is when Anheuser-Busch owned the parks. And unfortunately, we saw Geauga Lake operating across the lake, but we never actually went to Geauga Lake. So that's a shame that I will die with, never
Mhm.
having visited Geauga Lake while it was up and operating. Because I know that place, people love that place. And then with the same girlfriend, we flew to Texas, and we went to Six Flags Over Texas, and we went to Six Flags Fiesta Texas, and we went to Six Flags Astro World in Houston. And we went to SeaWorld in San Antonio. And that was just a whole nother, like, actually getting on a plane with my own money and my own girlfriend and flying to another state to go ride roller coasters. And so that was a great experience. But again, real life, especially if you're a perpetual graduate student like I was, and perpetual graduate students don't have a lot of money to
Right.
travel, and it's not a cheap hobby, really, if you're, I mean, unless you buy unless you just stay local all the time. And
Right.
I've always loved the travel. The travel's been a big part of it for me.
Sure.
So kind of fast forward another 10 years to the aughts, and I met my wife, and I met my wife, we got married, and then it turned out after we were married, we realized, oh, we both like theme parks. And that was like, oh, it's kind of weird because usually that's the kind of thing that would bring two people together. But
Right. Right.
we met, fell in love, got married without knowing any of this about each other. She grew up on Long Island, going to a little theme park, a little tiny little amusement park in Long Island called Nunley's,
Hmm.
Nunley apostrophe S, which apparently was a classic place and really popular in Long Island. And, everybody in Long Island who grew up there went there, and we both had pretty high pressure jobs.
Hmm.
And we, I was on Wall Street, and it was just, it was a rough time for me. It was just, real work all the time, like, high pressure jobs, staying late, being asked to work on the weekends and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And
Wow.
then, and then, my wife is an emergency doctor,
Oh, wow.
works in an ER. Yeah. So I'm trying to remember our first, so we started doing little trips, like basically flying away for the weekend, going to theme parks and riding stuff. And a friend of mine showed me pictures of Top Thrill Dragster, uh, at King at actually no, yeah. So a friend of mine shows me pictures of Top Thrill Dragster, and I'm like, what? Because I had been out of it. I'd been out of the scene
Oh,
for the
right.
last 10 years at least. So I didn't know there was a thing called Millennium Force. I didn't know there was a thing called Top Thrill Dragster. So they're showing me pictures of Top Thrill Dragster and King Ka, and I'm like, what the, like, when did they change the laws of physics, like in the process, and I was like, oh my God, how does anybody go on that? And so my wife and I we had a Labor Day weekend coming up, and she's like, let's go to the beach. And I was like, let's go ride some roller coasters. So we went to Cedar Point, which has both.
Right.
And I'll tell it was a long weekend. We stayed in the Breakers. Is that I forgot that's the name of the
Oh,
hotel, right?
Hotel Breakers. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and like you look out the window and there's Top Thrill Dragster, and I'm like, I don't know if I can go on that thing. It's just too, it's like fucking with my brain. Sorry, can I drop F-bombs or should
That's
I?
okay. Yeah, we can bleep them out or edit them
Okay,
out.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was pretty like, I was pretty scared. And we rode every roller coaster at Cedar Point, but I feel like we spent the whole weekend circling Top Thrill Dragster, because I was too afraid to go on it. And I watched some guy go up and he had his hands up the whole time. Like
Wow.
I remember being at we were many hundreds of yards away, and I just see the thing go up vertical with some guy's got his hand, he's not even holding on. And I'm like, I was like, we can't go home. I can't face my friends at work without riding this thing, you know? So I was losing sleep over it. I was
Wow.
having nightmare. Well, I kept imagining, I don't know, I just kept seeing myself in slow motion at the top of the arc, and like being stuck there or just being so high just terrified me, that
Right.
feeling. And you know what? You sweat and you shake, and when they lock you in to the seat, and you're at that point you're not going anywhere, you're not getting out, right? Because you're locked in.
Right.
and and the ride's over in 17 seconds. And it turns out that whatever, and I think this is a good lesson, when people ask me, oh, how can I ride roller coasters without being afraid? I mean, from my experience, whatever insanity you've conjured up in your head, because your brain will definitely come up with all kinds of horror
Of course.
scenarios, right?
Of
And the
course.
truth is that reality is not anything like what your imagination is gonna conjure.
Usually.
So that was my lesson, that whatever I'm thinking is not gonna it's not gonna match the reality. And I also have a lot of faith in engineers and design and science and that kind of stuff. So I wrote it, and it was like we were like totally psyched, taking pictures, and we were pumped. And now I don't know. Now I've lost track of how many times I've ridden, a giga coaster or whatever the heck they're called. Sorry, I can be
Strata.
very
Well, it's a strata. Yeah.
strata. Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can be. I'm getting old, and so this is causing a lot of my terminology to fade over time.
That's okay. That's okay.
So that's kind of my roller coaster journey, except that, I mean, what I failed to add was that, so my wife and I suddenly, like, we found something that we both really had passion for, that we, I don't know, there was something that kind of, we like caught the bug and we started going a little crazy. I think that's one way to put it. Like, I mean, one thing, like, so I'm on the web one day and I find like a coaster trip to Japan and Korea. And I'm like, we got to do this. So the next time we had the next time I took a long vacation, we went on this organized trip to Japan and Korea, to ride roller coasters. And it was like, this is just so awesome. And we both love to travel. We're both pretty adventurous with food. We both, I don't know, we both have like I don't know, I like kind of, um, I don't know, like it's not that I don't like being home. I love my couch and my TV and everything, but then I also have like maybe a higher need for stimulation than some people have very high need for stimulation. Some people have lower need for stimulation. And certainly during this period, I was like, let's do this stuff. So we started traveling like really obnoxiously, and we made friends on that. We went on a bunch of these organized trips, and
Hmm.
we made good friends on these organized trips, and we started planning trips together, and we kept getting more and more adventurous with these trips. And then I took a job in Europe. Like, I had a
Oh,
chance to leave my Wall Street job and teach in the Netherlands.
oh, nice.
So I got an apartment in the Netherlands. My wife stayed in New York, working in New York because she was making good money. She's a doctor. So she would come over. She would, like, she's an ER doctor. So you do shifts, right?
Right,
So she would do her full 2 weeks of shifts in like a week. And then, because it was X number of hours per 2 week period. And so
right.
she would knock that out, come to Europe for 10 days
Nice.
while I was working. And then she would go home. And then I would come back to New York like 1 or 2 weekends a month.
Right, right.
And, it was absolutely exhausting.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and it only lasted for like 3.5 years, but we were never apart for more than 12 days, I think, in the whole 3.5 year period, which is
Nice.
pretty good because I,
Oh,
I know
yeah.
I know married couples who have transocean commutes, and they, sometimes they don't see each other for a month or two.
Right.
It's not cheap. But then when we had a break, or when she was over there, we would travel around Europe. So we went to Italy and we went to Spain and we went to Austria and Hungary and to Scandinavia and UK, and just, and then we met in Taiwan. Like, I flew from Amsterdam east to Taiwan, and she flew from New York west, and we
Right.
met in Taipei, and we drove around Taiwan, and tried to ride all the roller coasters in Taiwan. So it's been that kind of experience, and it's been really fun. It's just been crazy. Here, see, this is Parque del Café, which is the coffee themed amusement park in Colombia.
Oh, okay. The hat you're
We
wearing.
went,
Yep. Yep.
we went to Colombia last year
Nice.
for spring break. This year we went to Brazil for spring break. And it's been a crazy ride. And so then I started doing, my job in the Netherlands was teaching accounting and finance at a hotel management college.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so like in the United States, we have like high school and then college, right? And
Right.
in Europe, there's more like a two-tier higher education system. So there's high school, and then they have the universities, but then below whatever, they have the professional schools.
Right.
So they have things like,
Functional.
yeah, just if you want to specialize in some profession,
Right.
then you go to one of these. And it, unfortunately, it translates as high. They call it high school, even though it's it's not secondary education. It is higher education, but
Right.
the name for it is high school. Anyway, so I taught at one of these high schools where they were teaching students hotel management. And I learned a lot. I didn't know much about hotels other than staying at them, but I learned a lot about how hotels are managed. And I learned a lot about how hotels price their rooms, which turns out to be very similar to the way airlines price their seats and the way rental cars price, it's all that dynamic pricing stuff, right?
Yep. Yep.
And so it comes out of those industries. And so I started doing research on how to apply those kinds of pricing mechanisms to theme parks. And at the time, it was like, if you were an amusement park, you painted this year's admission price onto a piece of wood and you nailed it to the wall, and that was the admission price for the
Right.
year, for the summer, right? And now every park, certainly every major chain and every major destination park has some version of differential or dynamic pricing.
Right.
But it was it was totally unheard of when I started looking at it. So, so I got like quoted I got quoted in a couple of articles. I spoke at IAPA a few times at IAPA Expo about
Yep.
dynamic and pricing, and and then I don't know, things kind of snowballed sort of, and I ended up getting first, like, they did little articles about me in my alumni magazines, like if you go to like whatever Boston College, they have like Boston College magazine. So like I appeared in my alumni magazines for
Oh, okay.
for my grad school and my college. And then I got a call from a New York Times reporter, and he wrote an article about me in the New York Times. And the title of the article was Professor Roller Coaster.
Yep.
So
That's where I got it from. Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
so eventually my boss in the college where I teach now, he was like, you want to teach an amusement parks a course about theme parks? I was like, yes, I do. So I get to teach about theme parks now, and I've started teaching a hospitality course as well, because I love talking about food and beverage, especially with regard to theme parks, but just I love theming and experiences and themed attractions, and
Sure. Same.
and during COVID, when everything shut down, David was saying how he had to come up with a project while we were shut
Yeah.
down. So I found my project turned out to be this old attraction that was in New York City back in the 70s. Like it was a school trip to Manhattan, and they
Right.
had this thing called the New York Experience. I
Mhm.
mean, you're both Californian, or no?
No,
David,
and I'll get to that. We'll get to that, but go
all
go
right,
ahead.
sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
so
Let me you finish. Yeah.
New York Experience was like a multimedia, like an hour-long multimedia show about New York, right? It was on a
Okay.
giant 70-foot wide screen. There were like special effects and disco ball and all that, speakers under the seats, and a
Okay.
bunch of, kind of like think like if Muppet Vision 3D was done like in 1973.
Sure.
It's kind of
Sure.
like that. And
Gotcha.
so I like researched the hell out of that during COVID and started writing a paper on it. And then there at IAPA is this thing called the Themed Experience and Attractions Academic Symposium, which is like
Okay.
a one-day scholarly event on the last day of IAPA. So I presented my research on the New York experience at that symposium. And then the next year they were like, "Hey Martin, you want to run the symposium?" I was like, "Sure." So we just had our second, or rather my second. It was the sixth annual themed experience and attractions academic symposium. It's a mouthful.
Yeah.
So we collect scholarly submissions. We review all the abstracts. We decide, okay, this one gets in, this one doesn't. And then we do a whole day of academic presentations, keynote speakers, we serve lunch, and we get support from IAPA to do it.
That's great. That's awesome. Well, okay, that was quite an intro. So there's a few things I want to unpack there. There's a good
Hard
intro.
to shut
That's
me up.
okay. No, that's okay. I was just trying to. I don't know if you've heard any of my interviews before, but those who are listening that have listened to many episodes of this podcast know that I like to interject and have banter with my guests, and so I try to respond to things that are said. I'm not an interviewer that just asks a question and then moves on to the next question. So
Banter
just
away.
mentally, what's that?
I said banter away. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I just
No, that's okay. That's okay. But I was trying to keep track, and at least noted a few things that are still in my head at this point. I could have taken notes, but that's okay. So first of all, and this is why I said I would get to that, to relate to the first aspect of what you said. So to answer your question real quick on the David side, David is from California, has lived in California all his life. I, on the other hand, have lived all over this country, but most notably to what you mentioned, grew up in New Jersey, and the first 7 years of my life, I lived in Fort Lee. And that'll be striking for you to what you said, but for those that are listening may not be aware, Fort Lee is where the George Washington Bridge is. I lived in a high-rise 17th floor facing Manhattan, and could see the George Washington Bridge on the New Jersey side from where I live. That's a kind of a frame of reference for you, Martin, and for our listeners. And Fort Lee is right next. Yeah.
Andrew, so I grew up in Englewood Cliffs.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I was born in Englewood, so yeah, you were right there. So
we were probably both born in Englewood Hospital.
I was born in Englewood Hospital. So here's a small word story for you there. Small world story. It's my second of this past week. And again, Martin, you know this, but just for the benefit of our listeners, Palisades Park was right near Fort Lee. It's the town of Palisades Park is adjacent to Fort Lee. Sadly, Martin, I think clearly based on when you said you went to college, I am about 5 to 10 years younger than you. So sadly, in terms of, I was born a couple years after Palisades Park closed. So I never got to go there. My parents would talk about it, but I never got to go there. And, it is what it is. So anyway, I can relate to your story there. I grew up going to Six Flags Great Adventure. It was always Six Flags by the time I reached the age of going there. Remember that fire, very unfortunate, very tragic event. Unfortunately, tragedy very rarely, but does occur at theme parks. Why does that happen? Because theme parks are not some magical place as much as Disney would like to say they're magical places. They are real world places, and things do happen in the real world. Now, theme parks, roller coasters, rides, attractions, etc., are designed with the utmost safety in mind. And so it's very rare, to the point of what you mentioned about, Top Thrill Dragster and the engineering and the science, etc., that goes behind them, the maintenance. So again, accidents are rare, but they do occasionally happen. And that fire, probably in terms of death, is the most tragic event to ever occur at a theme park to this day. Occasionally there's a roller coaster that if something happens, maybe one person dies, very sadly, a few people injured, but it's rare you have, a dozen deaths, like you said, 10, 12 deaths. And unfortunately, pretty much all those, I think like you said, were teenagers, but very tragic. You mentioned about travel. So, we talk about that. It's one of the common theme we talk about here on the podcast. And like you, I'm very passionate about travel, Martin. I kind of ebbs and flows in my life based on the kind of job I have currently, and things have shifted more recently in my life for a number of reasons towards more travel. Part of it's my job that I have versus say jobs I've had before, more recently since COVID. Part of it is being able to work from home, which equals being able to work from anywhere. I've flexed in incredible, insane ways in that way where I'm working. I've worked from road trips, from my car, from a hotel, from a cafe. I've been working from cruise ships now. So it's, just working from airplanes, from airports, anywhere. It's amazing. It's an amazing life. And so to that end, I've gotten to the point in my life now where I am home I'm not even being exaggerative here whatsoever. I am home less often than I am traveling. It's about two-thirds, one-third ratio at this point, most months, to the point where my friend Freddie, a good friend of mine, has given me the title of tourist status here in Orlando, where I live, where I'm basically as often as tourists are, not more than that. Nice. Yeah, so fun times. Again, I am not complaining. I am actually quite proud and feel fortunate that I have the life that I have and am able to travel the way I am. One thing you mentioned in the course of your story, Martin, that I found interesting is, and perhaps you already see this in yourself, you were pretty lucky in that you had this girlfriend in what, the 90s, right, in Pittsburgh, that was a parks, enthusiast, if you will. And then you meet your wife. You didn't meet her or right up front know this about her until after you got married, which is a crazy, wild story right there. But she also, as it turns out, was enthusiast. And it's striking because, and this is not, this is just an observation. I can't help but have observed this. It doesn't matter to me. Everyone's equal, but you can't help but notice going to, say, enthusiast events, or you've been on those trips you mentioned, Martin, that I don't know what the percentage is, but it's probably something like 2/3, 1/3, or maybe even 80/20. The percentage of women in this hobby is definitely less than men. It's a male dominated hobby. Doesn't make it right. Certainly, I think, whoever wants to be a part of it should be all a part of it, woman or man or whatnot. But it just turns out it's a mostly males. So you were able to find two females that are passionate about the hobby. That's pretty cool. The last thing I wanted to relate, or actually just ask you a follow-up question. These organized events you went on, first of all, when's the most recent one you went on? What year was that?
It's been a long time.
Okay.
2012 was
Okay.
our last.
And who organized them? Was it TPR? Was it
It was
ACE?
TPR.
Gotcha.
It was TPR.
Because I figure it was TPR based on the time period. They did a lot of events more early on.
We went on a lot of TPR trips. I think we did like 5 or 6, maybe 7 over a 4 or 5 year period. It was great until it wasn't. We had great experiences, and then we moved on. And
right.
Part of it was just we learned a lot from traveling with them, and then we realized, okay, we can do a lot of this on our own. So
sure. I can understand that. Makes sense. Okay, very good. Well, again, thanks for the very thorough intro. And you kind of were very efficient in a way there, addressing at least a couple of the questions I was going to ask you later on, so we can, just kind of move over to other questions I had. But again, thanks for the good intro. So let's go ahead and talk about and move on to our theme park time machine. So what was your first coaster that you ever rode?
I wish I could answer this question, and you sent me some questions in advance.
Right.
And this one is just, I'm sorry to say, I have no idea.
Okay.
And my wife and I are very strict counters, and one of our rules is you cannot count a coaster that you don't remember riding.
Sure, of course.
We're talking about early in life. So, probably it was something at the Danbury State Fair or at Palisades Park or Rye Playland or something. I have no idea. So that's not in my count.
No worries. I totally get it.
I'm old also, so it's a long time.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I guess, kids growing up these days, you're a teenager or enthusiast, they're kind of fortunate in this respect, at least, that they're growing up in the age of technology. Well, the age of digital smart technology, mobile technology, phones and apps and everything.
Yeah.
Even Excel files. Some of this. Yeah, I've got friends that are just past the teenager phase, but they still use Excel for tracking coasters. Hey, whatever works for you. But of course, there's great apps for it. And nowadays, I can imagine a lot of your teenage enthusiasts, they logged their app in their phone when they were 8 years old and they have a phone, that kind of thing. They're for their first coaster. But in any case, for those of us that are not teenagers now, it was a little different back in, like you said, the 70s, 80s, etc. So, but that's okay. So I have a feeling you've already kind of talked about this kind of next part of the roller coaster time machine, which is really our fear journey. But so I'll just go ahead and ask it. Was Top Thrill Dragster, or is Top Thrill Dragster the coaster that most intimidated you of all the coasters you've been on, or has it been something else?
Well, I think that was sort of breaking through it was a mountain I was afraid to climb, but I wasn't afraid in general of rides.
Right.
But riding that ride in particular terrified me. I mean, I remember as a kid on that 1970 whatever trip to Magic Kingdom, I remember waiting online to ride Space Mountain, with
Sure.
my sister, and I chickened out,
Right.
like, because you can't, when you're a little kid, you can't see what it is,
Right.
right? It's just you're just walking up to a building, and so I mean, I couldn't have been older than 7 or 8 or something like that. So
Right.
I was just couldn't get the I couldn't get the courage to do it. Uh, anyway, and that's just how it was. But
Right.
I I don't want to say that like I don't have any fear now, because now so now what I'm afraid of, and I don't mean to like scare listeners or anything like that, but
Right.
we live in a real world, as you say. I mean, look, I don't think that I'm not afraid in general, because I know that I'm more likely to fall out of my chair and break my neck
Right.
here on this podcast than I am likely to get injured on an amusement device. I mean, just the number of ride cycles that rides and roller coasters go through every year, and the number of people that ride rides safely, make it nearly a statistical impossibility to actually get hurt on a ride. I mean, you might trip on the platform of the station and, get a bruise on your knee. I mean, that kind of thing
No, sure.
happens, right? Or you bump your knee on the safety bar. That
Right.
stuff happens all the time. But actually being seriously injured on an amusement ride is virtually unheard of. And that's why that's why the David mentioned the media going after fear. I mean, they make it a news story every time a roller coaster stops on the lift hill, when in fact the ride is behaving exactly as the way it's designed to behave. If there's if there's an issue, then the thing stops. So I'm not afraid of rides in general. I am afraid of, we travel abroad so much
Right.
that I am afraid of some of the, and some, we've been to China. Cheryl and I have been to China, I don't know, 7 times, maybe
Right.
8 times.
Wow.
And China's a little scary. The
Right.
rides are knockoffs of the American and European designs. Um,
Right.
and it's not clear that, and sometimes it's not clear that, proper maintenance is being practiced. So
Right.
that scares
Right.
me. That's the kind of thing that scares me, is sometimes that we feel like maybe we're taking a little risk when we're out, and when we're far afield. So we've been to like Malaysia and
Yeah. Same.
Indonesia and the Philippines and China and Taiwan, and even look, we have accidents in Europe and the United States. Like there's always a risk, but I'm not going to hide under my bed for the rest of my life. I'm going to go out and
Right.
live. And again, it's so highly unlikely that anything will happen. So I mean, I have been on Chinese coasters. Like I remember, like it was like a knockoff Vekoma Boomerang, right? Which no, a Vekoma SLC. Sorry, it was a a knockoff. And
Yeah.
so my wife and I sat down. It was really hot, so it was kind of like we're broiling. And then like stupidly we pull down our restraints, so we're locked in. And then like they don't dispatch for like 20 minutes.
Oh
So we're
gosh.
just sitting there baking, locked in, and we can't really communicate, with the
Right.
crew, that we're like not comfortable. So that kind of thing just sucks. But
Right.
yet, waiting in a 2-hour line in the hot sun with 80 million people, that can be unfun. But
Yeah.
I think I don't know, my nemesis ride is Jupiter in Japan at
Okay.
Kijima Kogen Park. I think it's,
Okay.
sorry, I want to look it up, because I don't want to screw up the story. It's let's see, Jupiter. And this was we yeah, it oh, I got it right. Amazing. In Beppu, Japan,
Okay.
Kijima Kogen. It's a Woody built by Intamin in 92.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, and yeah, Intamin built a few Woodies in Japan, actually. And I've just never been on a coaster that was that rough. And I think maybe at the time I was like out of shape, and maybe I
Right.
had like kidney stones or something. You know what I mean? Like
Oh wow. Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
just an unhappy camper in general, you know. And we rode this ride, and I really thought I was gonna die. Like it was
Yeah.
so rough that I thought, oh my God, there's some kind of damage happening to my internal organs. You know, it was just a painful ride.
Right.
So I was really happy when I got off of that thing. And to this day, that is always my number one roughest coaster that I've ever
Okay.
been on.
Okay, you may have inadvertently answered another question off
So
that I have
sorry.
later, but well, no, that's I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying I'm just sort of housekeeping here. That what I'm just commenting. So when we come to that, it may be you've already answered that, but we'll get to that later. But in any case, let's kind of okay. Let me just go ahead and relate to one thing you've mentioned here, and we'll get back on track. We'll get back on track to the actual question I asked you, which I think you've answered, but we'll figure that out. But first. You mentioned about China. So I've been to China, and I can relate to what you're saying because, again, a lot of the coasters, not all, but a lot of the coasters in China are, as you call them, knockoffs, Golden Horse most commonly.
Yeah.
And riding a Battle of Jungle King, which, tilt coasters are very rare, albeit though technically I have a tilt coaster that's 5 minutes from me at Universal, but still they're fairly rare in the world. And other than that one that's 5 minutes away, Gringotts. I had never been on a tilt coaster before, and here I am getting on, not of a Coma, not a world-renowned coaster company that's known for having very safe rides. I'm getting on this Chinese manufacturer. I don't know what's going to happen, and yeah, it's not the coaster that's scared me the most. I was not really naturally, truly afraid, but as we were slowly tilting, I'm like, oh boy, hopefully the holding brakes, works and keeps working, and we connect up to the track right. And it did not help that there was a Chinese woman just a few seats back from me who was, and you can hear this in the video that I did a POV that we posted to our YouTube channel. She is just crying. It's like, oh my gosh. But anyway, obviously I'm here, everything was fine. But in any case, getting back to the question I asked, so would you say that Top Thrill Dragster is the coaster that has scared you the most?
No, I mean, it did. I can't
Okay,
say.
I mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
it was
that's fine. I mean, there's
certainly.
nothing wrong with that being an answer. So
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, I think I definitely broke through some kind of fear, doorstep when I rode that.
okay, all right. So you didn't chicken out. It was making you nervous that weekend. You were staying at the hotel. You could see people riding, blah blah blah. So you rode it. You conquered your fear. How did you feel when you got off of Top Thrill Dragster the first time?
Absolutely elated. We took selfies, and again, this, I think the even more than the excitement of and the feeling of accomplishment was that lesson.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God,
Right.
I really built that up to be some kind of horror and the actual experience didn't come close. I don't want to say it was
Yeah.
it's a fun, exciting
Yeah.
ride, but it wasn't the fun, exciting ride that kills you that I had dreamt up in my head. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So yeah, no, absolutely. And what you're describing is what a good friend of my personal friend of mine and good friend of the show, one of our first guests, one of our repeat guests here on the podcast, none other than Chuck Cole, describes what you're talking about as a failure of the imagination. So your mind, when it comes up with things and imagines different scenarios for what's going to happen next, that's, imagination working. But when your mind only thinks of the negative possibilities and not of the positive, or more importantly, the realistic possibilities,
Mm-hmm.
that's a failure of your mind to really think about all the possible outcomes. And most importantly, to think about what's most likely. Our mind, unfortunately, is not wired to usually, in general, naturally think of the realistic outcome. We tend to be much more, quote unquote, creative, right, wrong, or indifferent. And that's where fear comes from. That's where anxiety comes from.
Yeah.
So, but in any case, it's great you wrote it. And of course, by conquering your fears, by fighting versus flighting, as the case may be, you felt good afterwards. Now, what would you say, since that was your kind of critical fear conquering event, what would you say was any lasting or impacts following the first ride on Top Soldier Extra that conquered your fear? What were the impacts of that?
Well, again, I think that I knew that, I don't know, I mean, I felt like that was sort of once you broke through that thing, then you could accomplish anything, that you would never, there was it made no sense to be so fearful again in the future. I think that was,
Sure.
I mean, there were some other impacts. Like, I think, we went on that same trip, we went on Millennium Force, which
Sure.
also looks like an intense experience.
Right.
And I did have, I had issues with the seatbelt. I don't know if I know other people have had, like, I was a bit heavier at the time, and just my body shape and whatever, and they don't add a lot of extra length on those Intamin seat belts for the top,
Right.
for the Millennium Force seats. And I had trouble getting my seatbelt closed, and that really freaked me out. And
Right.
so it did actually get me to lose weight. I was like, I never want to. I mean, I got it closed, and I've had similar experiences with the Intamin. I'm forgetting. It's an Intamin model. There's one in Japan. There's one in Denmark. I'm blanking. Sorry. Let me try to.
That's okay. I know
I
you've
feel
written a lot of coasters, so
like Tobu Zoo Park in Japan. Um, Kawasemi. It's the Intamin Megalite.
okay. I was
Yeah.
wondering.
So I guess there are five. I think I've been on three of them.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, I've been on. There's one in, yeah, there's one in Japan, one in Denmark, and I think the other three are in China. Yeah. So I think maybe I've been on three of them total.
Okay.
Um, anyway, and they have the same kind of tight seat belts
Right.
on
Right.
shorter Intamin trains. And I remember being in Denmark, and it was cold, and it hurt, the metal against my fingers hurt, and I'm trying to like get the Intamin the Intamin latch to
Right.
connect on the thing, and like around my gut, so, and that's a terrible, uncomfortable feeling of like, oh no, I do not want to do the walk of shame on this,
Right.
you know
Right.
I mean, I'm a big guy, but I'm not, I don't think I'm that fat looking. I don't know. Anyway,
Right.
um,
No worries. No worries.
so
Yeah.
that kind of freaked me out, and so that was another sort of thing, lasting impact that riding a roller coaster had, was learning, was thinking, okay, I gotta make changes in my life, or I need to do certain things or change my behaviors. Then that's going to enhance my experience in the future,
Gotcha.
because I
Gotcha.
won't have that anxiety if I know that I'm healthy.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. So, how many coasters have you ridden in your life?
Um, we're up to sorry, I wrote it down. Like, it's too many, is what it is. Um, it's 2,324 is my
Wow.
current count. And
Wow.
my wife is 11. So we're really strict counters. So we don't count powards. We don't count something that moved. We don't count something that got renamed or
Right. Of
rethemed, stuff like that.
course.
And then I stopped counting butterflies. Are you familiar
Right.
with butterflies?
Yeah. Yeah.
I used to count them, and I thought, you know what? I don't want to chase these things. There's like hundreds of butterflies in Germany, and I don't feel like driving
Right.
back in Germany, like to every single butterfly, because I don't really, they're fun once in a while. I don't want to like
Right.
ride six
Right.
every day. So
Okay.
I stopped counting them. So my wife has not yet taken them off her list. So she's 11 higher than I am on her count.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Yeah, I have very close friends of mine. They're not at your level. I mean, you congratulations, you have the award. Well, not that we have an award for it, but so to speak, I'm speaking tongue in cheek. The award for the guest with the most coasters, and you have it not quite by double. The next behind you is a good friend of mine, Bradley Edholm, who is a
Oh, I
guest.
know, but I mean, I'm friends with him on Facebook,
Yeah,
but I don't know him personally, but we're friends on
yeah.
Facebook.
No, he's a very good friend of mine. I've gone on trips with him. He's stayed in my home, slept right in the
Yeah.
sofa bed right next to me in my office is also my guest room here, and
Ah,
friends with his entire family. Just went on a cruise with his mom. They're awesome people. But Bradley is about 1,400 or so now, so he's not quite. He's a little more than half of what you have. But then again, Bradley is in his mid-20s, so he's got years to catch up. So
oh
to speak.
yeah, he's on a tear.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He is. He's quite impressive. And he's very. If you ever get to meet him, I think you would enjoy meeting him and talking to him. He's very, very smart kid. Well, quote unquote kid. In his 20s. And he's very good at planning trips and so forth and so on. In fact, he and his dad right now are on a winter trip here in Europe, having a good time. But in
Yeah.
any case, you have the award, and.
Yeah.
But we, again, very good friends of mine. And whilst the podcast, I've been on the podcast, Larry and Jean Lyons, who are probably a little bit older than yourself. Not much.
Yeah, I'm friends with Larry Lyons on Facebook also.
Yep.
Again,
Great people. If you ever get to meet them, if you ever get to meet them, they're awesome people, and they live in Ohio. They're over 1,000. They just reached 1,000 this year, which is a big milestone. And they met, they've been married for decades. They're one of the most successful, success certainly measuring in terms of number of years and decades, married couples. And they both met as enthusiasts, and one of their first dates was going to Kings Island together, riding the Beast, for the first time when it first opening year. And anyway, but they each had written coasters before they met. And Jean, she has, I don't know if it's 10 or 11, but there's some small number like the difference in you and your wife that she has over him. And it's all in good fun, but she'll tease him sometimes, or quote unquote, not really, but quote unquote brag with friends. Oh yeah, I've got more credits than Larry, and Larry will just roll his eyes. But anyway, so I've seen that sort of situation before. But in any case, a lot of coasters. That's really impressive. So, and obviously, I know you've done repeat rides. You talk about riding almost 24 times on Loch Ness Monster just in one day. So you've obviously ridden coasters many, are probably talking easily tens, hundreds of thousands of times. You've ridden a coaster in your life. So many rides. So of all of those rides, what would you say has been the craziest moment? Something interesting, unique that happened, an evac, something going wrong, a phone, falling out of someone's hand when people do that stupid thing of bringing their phones out, whatever it may be. What is the craziest thing that happened to you?
It's okay. I'll give you a negative story and a positive story, but again, I need to go back to that, what I was saying about the statistical safety of these rides. So you would think that I've had lots of weird, crazy things happen in all those cycles, but in fact, they're incredibly rare. So,
Right.
I mean, they're rare, and they're usually really minor when they do happen. So I think one just minor example is we were in Korea, I think, and we were on a family coaster, and it valleyed,
Oh,
it
okay.
valleyed, but no, it just got stuck. And then we all sort of try to kind of all
Right.
this, which eventually unstuck it. So that was just a stupid little thing that happened,
Right.
But I mean, one crazy thing I remember is this was really weird. We were on Steel Eel at
Oh yeah, yeah.
at San
SeaWorld.
Antonio SeaWorld.
Yeah, yeah.
And I love I'm a big fan of the Morgan Hypers. You
Oh,
know,
they're great. Yeah.
I love them. And it was my wife and me, and then my wife's sister was sitting in a seat behind us. And it has a seatbelt and a lap bar.
Right.
And the guy and my sister-in-law ended up getting seated with this guy, you know, some rando. And then we were started going up the lift hill, and he like turns to her and he said, "Don't tell anyone, okay?" And he unbuckled his seatbelt
Right. Right.
because he wanted more. He wanted more
Airtime.
airtime.
Yeah.
And you know, I think that's a really stupid thing to do, and it's irresponsible, and obviously it breaks the rules and stuff like that. But
Right. Right.
you know, we also, you know, weren't going to snitch on him. But and
Yeah.
I didn't say anything to him, but I was, you know, I'm all for following the rules. Yeah. Although I got a traffic ticket today. I got pulled over by a cop.
Hey, that happens. That happens to the best of us. Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
never. I'd make the same U-turn every day. I never noticed the sign. Anyway,
Wow.
right at like a block from where I live.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then so that was like that was a weird thing, but I also my best experience, just most crazy, and I got to give credit to TPR again. So
Yeah.
we were doing this trip. It was called the Road to Cedar Point, and we were at Knoebels,
Mm.
and it was late. And sorry about the sirens. This is New
Oh,
York
that's okay. I can't hear him on this end.
Oh,
That's
good.
okay.
So we're at Knoebels, and they said, all right, we had a nighttime ERT session on Phoenix. So Phoenix is one, you've ridden Phoenix?
I have. Yes.
Yeah. So,
Yep.
you know, Phoenix is just one of the most fun coasters in the universe, if you ask me. It's probably my favorite Woody.
Oh,
And I love that ride. Tons of airtime. It's just a great ride. And TPR said to us, "Hey, buy bling, buy nighttime bling." So we all bought like flashing necklaces,
oh.
and,
Right.
like gloves that had glowing tips, and funny hats that were flashing on and off, and like lightsabers that were flashing on and off. And I forgot one of the Knoebels sons. I forgot which Knoebel son. Like
Yeah.
he rode with us, and it was raining. It was like drizzling. So the track was wet. Everything was wet. And we were all like lit up, and it was just, I don't know. I just felt like you're in the dark, so it was totally out of control. You couldn't see where you were going, but we were all just laughing and flashing, and it was just as much fun watching it go by as it was being on the train, just watching this crazy rainbow of light fly
Right.
by in the dark, in the rain. So that was probably the most fun I've ever had on a roller coaster. Like just laughing my head off and just feeling like this is totally off the hook. That was a great experience.
That's a
And
fun story.
and I appreciate and I thank TPR and Knoebels for, you know, giving us that experience, because I'll remember that for the rest of my life.
Yeah, that's a unique story. I've not heard anything like that one before. That's really fun. One thing I'll say, just relating to what you were talking about there, your story about the person unlatching the seatbelt. So you mentioned not snitching on them. Again, nothing wrong with snitching or not snitching, as the case may be. The only kind of guests I will snitch on in scenarios like that are the ones with the cell phones out. I was yelling, like literally yelling at a guy. I was on Gwazi once, Iron Gwazi specifically, a couple years ago, and it was kind of a slow day. There were some empty rows, believe it or not. It was walk on, and so there were no one in between me and a guy a few rows ahead of me, and he was riding solo. And I had a friend with me, and I forget who it was at the time, but anyway, he had his cell phone out recording, and I was yelling at him, "Put your phone away! Put your phone!" And he never listened. I don't think he heard me, or he was ignoring me. Well, it turns out he didn't hear me, because he also apparently had some kind of headphones on. I didn't realize it until we got off the ride. And I I handed it to him when he got off the ride. I said, you know what? You are lucky I'm not going to guest services and reporting you. How dare you endanger other people like that?
Yeah.
And it really pissed me off. But to be quite honest, I will put this out there. SeaWorld Entertainment, we have good relationship with them here in the podcast. We've interviewed reps from various parks. We are very big on promoting them. We get to go to media events. But I will say, and I'm going to do this as nicely as I can, Busch Gardens, wake up, install or change the locker system to be free lockers, like your competition up by Fort Universal, and install metal detectors, because your guests, your team members, your ambassadors, I should say, are not doing a good enough job stopping people from having these dangerous projectiles out in your ride. Someone is going to die. You've already had multiple people come back to the station bleeding because of these cell phones and whatnot. It is time. I am calling upon you, SeaWorld Entertainment, to spend the money and take the effort to do what Universal Orlando does, what multiple Cedar Fair parks do on their RMCs. It is beyond time that you do this. And again, if anyone from SeaWorld Entertainment is hearing me and thinks I'm angry, I am. And I'm done not saying anything about this. So here we are. Again, the podcast is ending. We're kind of in the mode of saying what we really think and not being silent on things. So sorry for that, Craig Martin, but I am beyond frustrated with that particular park and that particular coaster, because I live here in Florida and I have seen it happen personally. I have had friends that live here in Orlando or Tampa, more specifically, like my friend Kalen, who is the person who has the most rides on Iron Gwazi. He rides it every single day. He works right next to the park. And the number of times I've heard about, oh yeah, someone got hit by a phone on Gwazi again. Well, again, it's the guest's fault, but it's really also fundamentally the park's fault for not having the proper safety mechanisms in place. And it's just laziness and not willing to spend money, because the solution is already in place.
I agree with you.
If Maurice Piers can do it on their SLC, Busch Gardens, so can you.
Yeah.
So can you.
I agree with you. No argument.
Yeah. I've been angry about this for a very long time and kept silent, but sorry for that tirade there.
No, it's fine. No, some park, like, I think some parks have they have a number, and it's like, if you see anything, text this number and let us know, so some parks are properly proactive. And I've been on the other side where, like, a park went overboard. I mean, you remember when, so in the early 2000s, they had that accident at Holiday World, at Stark Raven Mad.
Yeah.
The woman basically stood up on the ride.
Yeah.
And I went to Hollywood Nights the next year, I think.
Yeah.
Or a year or two later. And it was a little overkill, like, because they made, like, I had a piece of paper in my pocket, like literally like a Post-it note, and they were like, that has to come out. And I thought, all right, whatever, mister. And then they when we were going up the lift hill on Voyage, like, somebody, like, turned around, like, to talk to their friend or something, like, basically turned their head. And like, we got a loudspeaker announcement, don't turn around, on the lift hill, like, please look for, but I understand. They were totally shell shocked by the accident, and so they didn't want to, they couldn't afford to deal with that kind of thing again. But you're absolutely right. And parks should know better.
Yeah, no, thank you. As these coasters become more intense, and you combine that with, again, the mobile technology age that we're in, and then I think that the perfect storm is the third thing that's somewhat unique to Busch Gardens is, Busch Gardens is again part of the theme park capital, if you will, and people in the theme park capital here, again, Busch Gardens included, they tend to be more tourists than people that go to Six Flags Great Adventure. And people, when they're in tourist mode, it's like they lose 50 IQ points. I see that in the divers here in Florida and Central Florida. I see that in the people watching that I do at parks, which is a fun activity that's kind of ancillary to what else, the reasons why I'm actually at the park that day. People are just stupid. They are really dumb and classless and selfish and all these things that, again, I'm painting with a broad brush here, but people, I observe a lot of people like this, unfortunately, especially at Disney World and these other, again, more touristy parks. And I think you see people with phones out on, say, Iron Gwazi versus, say, I don't know, Iron Rattler, or other RMCs that don't have the metal detectors and everything else, because again, the tourists in town, oh, I'm going to record this amazing coaster on my Florida vacation, whatever.
Yeah.
But but it is what it is. But going back to what you said about Holiday World, one of my favorite
I like
parks.
your rant. That was a good rant.
Thank you. I don't go on a lot of rants in this podcast, although these last few episodes, maybe hearing some rants from us, because we've decided we're just going to be honest about some things that we've been keeping quiet about. More to come on that front. But anyways, we've got some things we're going to be sharing pretty soon. But anyways, on to Holiday World, again, one of my favorite parks. I did not go to Hollywood Nights for a long time. Complicated story, but it's because I was married, and unlike you, I was not able to find a spouse that is a fan of coasters and parks for the most part, and other complications. But anyways, I have been to Hollywood Nights more recently, the past 3 years in a row. Taking a break next year. But I went the last 3 years. And they're not, piece of paper and people turning around lift hills. They're fine about that now. As I
I look, like I said,
yeah,
they had just gotten burned. So
but I absolutely, I totally understand. But I'm getting to a point here.
Yeah.
However, and I'm not going to name names. These are friends of mine. I have a few friends. Well, one friend and one person that I'm not friends with. Definitely not friends with. He's a bad Thuzy, but I'm not going to name names. Both of these people have been banned from Holiday World, rightly so. And again, one's a friend of mine, but shame on him. You know who you are, for standing up in Voyage. Okay, because again, we're all Thuzies who want our airtime. I'm sorry. Here comes another rant. This is against Thuzies. I'm sorry, guys. These coasters, Voyage, for Pete's sake. Why do you have to make Voyage even more intense? Voyage is incredible. It is so freaking intense. So shame on you for taking off your seatbelts and standing up. It's ridiculous. It's freaking ridiculous. Just follow the freaking rules. Okay, you get a little room with the lap bar. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. We all do that. Sky Rush method, whatever you want to call it. But you don't freaking take off the damn seatbelts on what is pretty much the most intense wooden coaster on the planet. Stop doing it. Stop being stupid enthusiasts and making us look bad. Okay, there's rant number 2. I'm on rants today. I have a third friend. I'm not going to say who it is. I'm going to let him be anonymous. He's been lucky because he was riding with me once, and he was a little drunk. He had alcohol early in the evening before going in the park, because it's a dry park. And he's like, oh yeah, I took off my seatbelt, and he was pretty much standing on the ride. I saw it. The corner of my eye, and looking over at him briefly during the ride, and he's lucky he did not get banned himself. Again, guys, you should not be doing that. Gals, whomever, don't do that. Again, you're going to get yourself banned. Got even worse, God forbid, and you're giving Thuzies a bad name. We should be, we can have fun and ride the rides with the restraints in place. Again, a little bit of loosen lap bar, fine. That's fine. That's not, that's still safe, but just be smart, people. Don't be idiots. So anyway, there's rant number 2.
Very good.
I did not plan these.
I always say, go ahead, staple me. I'm fine with it.
Yeah. I mean,
on a forceful ride like that,
yeah,
you can get stapled and you're still getting airtime.
Yeah. I mean, when I rode Velocicoaster for the first time, it was in a very unique circumstance, in that I, along with several other local Florida Thuzy friends of mine that are ACE members, we were invited as ACE members. ACE has a great relationship with Universal Orlando, which I am appreciative of. And shout out to Michael, our ACE rep, who's been our ACE rep for several years here in the state of Florida. He's the pioneer of that relationship. He does a great job. So shout out to Michael. We got to do a promotional filming, commercial filming, filling seats on Velocicoaster several weeks before, a couple of weeks before it opened to the public, before it even passed previews. That was amazing. I had to be silent about it here on the podcast because we were talking about Velocicoaster a lot then. I had to be very careful about talking about having ridden it and what I experienced. But anyways, it was a great experience, and we got stapled. And I'm like, oh boy, is this going to, maybe just for the, because they're brand new ride, not many people have ridden it yet. They're trying to be safe. They just got trained, commercial filming, whatever. and still amazing airtime. Well, it turns out that, Universal, I have a buddy of mine, my buddy Sean, who actually is at UOTM and works Velocicoaster. He's worked there for a long time now. And those guys, the Universal team members in general are some of the best trained, best delivery of customer service, best consistency in all of these things.
Sure.
Of any park in the world, including Disney World, including Disneyland, or any of the Disney parks. The team members, I think, are the best overall park employees across, park wide. And again, those guys, they dispatch like amazingly. They're proud of it. They post about it and so forth. And when they get record times, but also, they are pretty thorough with the restraints. Still, and again, there's nothing wrong with that. They're just being safe. And still, you get amazing airtime. In fact, here on the podcast, we did a meetup, our first year of the podcast. This was in October of 2021. So right when Velocicoaster had just opened, after the summer of Velocicoaster, if you will. Yeah. And we filled up a train with friends of the podcast, listeners, former guests, etc. And it was quite fun. And I warned people when we were kind of, hanging out, rallying the troops, because some people were riding Velocicoaster for the first time that day. In fact, there were several people that on the brake run of that ride that day, after that group ride, it proclaimed Velocicoaster as the new number one, David being one of them. But I remember, rallying the troops and everything, and just kind of telling people, you can look forward to this, and I'm not going to tell you about this secret, and watch out for this, but I'm not going to tell you what it is, et cetera. And I said, I'm going to warn you guys, you're going to get stapled, but you're going to have plenty of airtime. Trust me, don't worry. So yeah, Martin, I'm glad that you pointed that out, because even if you get stapled, does not mean you're going to have a bad ride. So try to be positive, folks. If you don't, don't have some room or whatnot. And again, keep those seat belts latched. If you lose them a little bit, all right, fine, whatever. But I may have done that myself. Might have loosened the seatbelt here in a little bit, but I'm not disconnecting seatbelts or opening them all the way up or anything like that.
Yeah. Hey, Andrew, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
I have my own ranty sort of.
Yeah.
Whatever. It's a pet peeve.
Yeah.
I see that you are an eyeglass wearer. Yeah. And I'm an eyeglass wearer. And I'm wondering about, it drives me a bit and I have the Crokies and the Chums.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
And so I've been on a lot of coasters, and I'm pretty good at keeping my eyeglasses secure on my face, no matter how violent the ride. The only time. So anyway, I hate it when they say you got to take your glasses off.
Right.
I'm like, trust me, my glasses aren't coming off. And they're like, you're taking your glasses off. And it's, and often for me, this happens in a foreign country, and we cannot communicate very clearly to one another. And I can tell them 1,000 times that I can show them that my glasses aren't coming off, and they still say, take your glasses off. So and it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. So the Ride to Happiness at Plopsaland, Belgium, it's a violent coaster, but they made me take my glasses off. And I hate this when this happens. It also happened on Pantheon, Busch Gardens, Williamsburg. They made me take my glasses off. I was like, come on, Anyway, drives me crazy because, as I said, I invest a lot of money into having the straps so my glasses don't come off.
Right.
A ton of money. Anyway, I'm just wondering, where do you fall on this? Or look, we carry contact lenses around with us in a glasses case just in case this happens. But I hate riding blind. What's your story?
Yeah. Well, so to clarify, the glasses that you see me wearing right now, and listeners, of course, we don't publish video. We're an audio typical podcast. But when we record, full disclosure, we record with video just so that we can see our guests and have a more personal connection with our guests by being able to see them. The glasses I'm wearing, they're just readers. So I just, because, I've got my questions here so I can read them and so forth. I don't, thankfully, thanks to laser surgery, I had my myopia corrected a number of years ago.
Very good.
And that may be what I recommend. Not that it's wrong or, the parks are right if the parks, having you take your glasses off, maybe a little bit extreme, I think. So maybe that's the solution for that longer term for you to consider. However, despite not needing eyeglasses, I do wear sunglasses a lot, especially in Florida and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And the glasses I buy, I used to wear Oakleys and these expensive glasses, and I've learned from losing glasses and glasses breaking and lenses getting scratched that it's not worth having these $200 sunglasses. So I buy all my glasses now, my sunglasses from a company. And we don't have advertisements on this podcast. I'm just doing a free promotion here because I'm just mentioning a company. Johnny Shades, Johnny Shades, and they're like $20-$30, and they're really good, like wraparound sunglasses, different color frames and lenses and so forth. And I have several pairs of them, and they fit very snugly, and I wear them on all kinds of coasters, all kinds of, I went on Quasi. Speaking of that one, like I mentioned earlier, Velocicoaster, and as I've tested them on less intense coasters, and they physics and everything, they stay on my head. Now, on occasion, I very rarely I've been told to take them off, which I follow the rules. I'm not going to start arguing with a park employee. I will say I have a really funny story, and again, at the end, this is another reason why I'm glad that I buy these cheap sunglasses. Of all the places that I get asked to take my sunglasses off, where does it happen? Not at Universal or Disney or Silver Dollar City or Dollar, one of these premier parks that are very, very safe parks. Of all the parks, it was at Mount Olympus, one of the historically has been not so safe parks. Employees that don't seem to care, and that was a wild trip going there this past year. So they had me take them off. I think it was on Pegasus. And again, I laughed it off. They're $20 sunglasses. Who cares?
Yeah.
I put them in my pocket. I've got my, cargo shorts pocket zippered. They're perfectly safe. They're not going to go anywhere. I get off the ride, and that ride is so rough. You've been on it, right? You've been on it.
Yeah, all those everything at Mount Olympus is rough.
Oh, yeah. It's a crazy park. I got off the ride, and the glasses were just shattered. They were shattered.
Yeah.
So,
that's why I carry a case.
Right.
Because it's kind of protected. So Andrew, I went on a roller coaster, and they were like, you got to take your glasses off. And I was like, please don't make me take my glasses off because I want to see. And they were like, you got to take them off. No discussion. And I took them off, and I was pissed. And after I got off the ride, I was like, I'm glad I took my glasses off. And that was on the Ultimate at Lightwater Valley. Yeah. Which was the longest roller coaster in the world. Or it was the longest. Yeah. That thing was just insane. It wasn't. It was built by a railroad company.
A railroad company, yeah.
Yeah, and that was a crazy ride. If you get a chance, check out the POVs, because that was a real,
I have seen them. But why were you glad you took your glasses off on that ride?
Because that thing is so rough.
Rough.
Even with the straps, like that was the kind of ride where you could lose something, like your brain.
Right. Gotcha.
Because that was a crazy, crazy ride.
Gotcha. Okay, interesting. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on. So you've ridden well over 2,000 coasters, lots and lots of coasters. What is your favorite coaster of all time?
Okay, of all time, again, I got to give credit to TPR. That first trip to Korea, we rode. It's called Eagle Fortress.
Okay.
And it's gone now. And so it was basically an arrow suspended, like the Bat or
Big Bad Wolf. Yeah.
Big Bad Wolf, exactly.
Yeah.
Or Dragon Iron. I mean Iron Dragon.
Yeah.
But it was built on the top of a mountain. So so the lift hill went up the mountain, and the coaster kind of came down the mountainside. And so because it was coming down a mountain, it ran way faster than spec. So it was supposed to be like a 40-mile-an-hour coaster, but it was more like a 60-mile-an-hour coaster.
Wow.
It was insane, and it was rough, and there was something about that ride. Again, we rode it, we had ERT at night, and it was just nuts. My wife hated it because those coasters have those giant over the shoulder horse collars.
Yeah.
So she's like right around the height where her head mashed side to side. And I'm so glad the industry has moved away from those restraints, because
Oh, yes, yes,
they were a real problem that was ignored, like a real safety
right.
problem that was ignored. But now they got it. Anyway, that was just an amazing ride, and I think it just tore itself apart, and it became
Right.
far too expensive to maintain, because the pay, it obviously, it's not like you're getting, you get more money from adding new rides, and like old rides
Right,
become less
right.
popular over time. So it was one of those things.
Yeah.
But that was an amazing experience, and I'll never forget that ride. And I'm sorry it
Wow.
doesn't anymore.
Wow. Now, on the flip side, the Woody that you mentioned in Japan, the roughest ride you've ever been on, would you say that's your least favorite coaster?
I at the mo so that's one I can name. There's also, like I said, there's a class of coasters in China, like, just Chinese coasters that are scary and don't run. They're
They
essentially,
don't run well. Yeah.
the Chinese knockoffs. So I'm going to
The
say my
knockoffs, whether or not.
favorite
Yeah.
coasters are Chinese knockoffs, especially like
Sure.
SLCs or boomerangy things. I mean,
Yeah.
if I mean, like, probably the answer I should give you is, I'm not a huge fan of Vekoma boomerangs. I'm not a huge
Right.
fan of SLCs in general.
Sure.
They tend to ride rough, but we also know that Vekoma has come 1,000 miles in terms of its designs and manufacturing now,
Oh,
and the new Vekomas are amazing. But I've certainly suffered riding Vekomas in the past. So
yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
I mean,
you know,
yeah.
yeah, and wooden coasters. The saying, you're never finished building a wooden coaster. You have to
Right.
keep up maintenance on
Oh,
wooden
yeah.
coasters.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And,
Replace the wood. Yeah.
some
Yeah.
of them tear themselves apart. Like, it's funny. I kind of used to love Mean Streak, which
Right.
totally tore itself apart. Which was incredibly painful. I don't know. There was something about it
Yeah.
that I kind of loved.
Yeah. So you
Pain
mentioned
is a,
about Vacom. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just saying, sometimes pain is a good thing. Sometimes like, that jarring is part of the experience.
Oh,
The
yeah. 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 Like ride. Yeah. Yeah. Like riding Voyage, especially on
yeah, 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 yeah,
Princess. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
That can
Coney
be.
Island Cyclone. I haven't been
Yeah.
on it in a couple of years, but they retracked it. I guess GCI retracked it.
Yeah.
It's not the same ride. I mean,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
goes. It's like butter now.
Right. But it's not the same.
I
Yeah.
feel like it's been emasculated. I mean,
Yeah.
not that I enjoyed the potholes and getting
Right.
your neck out of joint, but I feel like now it's like almost tame.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, it makes sense.
It's been a couple
Yeah,
of years.
you mentioned Vekoma. Not that this is kind of the flip side of least favorite coasters. This is sort of a company that has some very bad coasters. Like the SLCs, the Flying Dutchman, the Boomerangs. They're coasters from basically the 90s.
Yeah,
That era into the early
yeah,
2000s are not well hailed.
yeah.
Uh,
What's ironic,
yeah,
though, Andrew, is that at the same time they were building that stuff, they were building stuff for Disney that was good. I mean,
well, yeah, no,
Mine Train is not
but,
the same as an SLC, but you know what I'm saying? Like, they,
well, no, I think, well, so here's what I would say. There's a couple things, and I agree with you, but let me just interject here. So, what I was starting to say is the Boomerangs, the SLCs, Flying Dutchman a little different, but the Boomerangs, the SLCs especially, again, like you were saying earlier about over the shoulder restraints, they had those and combine that with some roughness, not good. Versus the arrows with OTSRs, arrows were designed better, and so at least initially for the first number of years, and with proper maintenance, maybe beyond that, the OTSRs were not painful, and they were not as obtrusive. But Vekomas, just again, they weren't designed as well. But the ones they do for Disney are done for Disney. It's different. I mean, for example, Colorado Adventure at Phantasialand is a mine train ride, much like some of the Big Thunders that were built by Vekoma. And most of the Big Thunders were, I think, built by Vekoma.
yeah,
And you can't. They're both mine trains, but Colorado Adventure is much more intense. But again, you don't have over-the-shoulder restraints, and so yeah, I have gotten hurt on Colorado Adventure because I rode solo once. Be careful of riding that ride solo. That is a wild ride if you ride it solo. That's the bench seat, all that. But again, no over-the-shoulder restraints and so forth. So I think that's the difference. And now, and the other one that I would say is the rock and roller coasters. The two of them, they're OTSRs, Vekomas, but they're at least inside, so they're not as susceptible to degrading over time. Although, yes, I can't speak for Paris since I've only been on it once, but Disney needs to do something about the one at Hollywood Studios. It is past its prime. It needs to either be a full-on rebuild situation like Hulk, or what's going on with as the Space Mountains have aged. Now the second one, the second oldest. Well, actually, technically, Tokyo Disneyland's is not it's the third oldest. Walt Disney World probably needs to be done too pretty soon. But retrack, redo. I see this. So I think for Disney, it's a combination of their more family attractions that have better restraints, more forgiving restraints, or indoors or whatnot.
Yeah, they're not extreme thrill rides.
Now, Now, with all that said, Vekoma has come a tremendous long way, and I know one of the coaster types, if you will, that are almost universally hated, across the Uzis and so forth, are the Flying Dutchman. And aside from that Zamperla, whatever you want to call that thing, they have one at Coney Island. I don't consider that the world's first flying coaster. That thing is something else. But the Flying Dutchman is the really.
You're talking about the Volare, the
Volare. Yes, thank you. But what is truly the world's first flying coaster were the Flying Dutchman. I remember riding the very first one when it was called Stealth at California's Great America, or at that time, actually, Paramount's Great America. And then, of course, it moved to Carowinds, become Nighthawk. And I loved it. And, again, initially it rode well that first year. I rode it like the first month it opened. But again, those have not weathered time well, and the restraints and, the riding position and all that stuff. But as far as I'm concerned, Vekoma, they totally more than apologized to the world and made up for themselves when they invented Fly, because Fly is the perfection of a flying coaster. And why is it that we still, at least unless there's some ones in China I don't know about, why is it there's only one launched flying coaster of all the coaster types? A flying coaster. Hello, Superman, Six Flags, wake up. Make a launch flying coaster. That's Superman right there. I mean, why hasn't it happened? Rumors are, by the way, that Fly is coming to the US. That type of, that second gen, if you will, become a flying coaster. Although it may be gimped for cost reasons, the ones that come here maybe have lift hills and not have the theming. But anyway, have you ridden Fly, by the way?
I have. You're gonna hate me. I didn't like it. I didn't like
really?
it. Not well. No, look.
Oh man.
No. Look. Actually, well, you mentioned theming. There's no way you can top that theming, right? I think that. No. You know what? I thought. First of all, I love the loading. The loading to the switch.
Don't say what it is. We try to.
Well, you can't. Yeah. You can't. There's no video of it, right? So you
can't. But don't say what it is. Don't tell people.
Okay. Yeah. Look, I thought there was like I said, Vekoma's come 1,000 miles since the old days. Right. And if you would have told me, oh, here's a Vekoma flying coaster that's smoother than butter, I would have said, you're kidding. And it is. It's smoother than butter. It's a long coaster. It's got a lot going on. But I don't know if it was, look, you know what I like to do on flying coasters? I like to hold my arms out, right? Pretend I'm Superman. And that thing has such strong forces, and it's so long, and there's so many twists and turns and flips and barrels and everything.
Right.
At a certain point, I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I dropped my arms, and I was just being just carried along limply. I don't know. Like it was actually too much for me. Maybe I was tired. No, it's so intense that it was too intense for me, so that I didn't love it. Like I didn't want to go back on because I was like, okay, one and done.
Oh, okay.
I'm not saying that. Look, if you want that extreme experience, then that's the ride for you. But I could not give my fast passes away afterwards. So I don't think I was the only one feeling that way, because we stayed in
Uh,
the
oh,
Charles Lindbergh Hotel.
oh, it's the best only way to stay there. I always
Yeah.
do that. Yeah.
And they give you the free
Yeah.
pass free
Yeah.
for line. I
Yeah.
couldn't we were standing by the exit offering our fast passes,
Yeah.
and that we were kind of, I mean, maybe we should have stood by the entrance, but
Yeah. Yeah.
we didn't want the staff to see that we were giving away.
Yeah. You might get in trouble. They're pretty strict.
So eventually I did find somebody, and he was like, yeah, thanks. So
Yeah.
anyway, but I definitely didn't see people who were coming off it weren't anxious to get back on. It's an intense ride. If you're into an intense ride, then it's the coaster for you.
Yeah, I mean, I like intense coasters, and I've gone to that park with a number of friends, and all of us are about rewriting that, and I mean,
All right, that's cool. Then
I was just at Phantasialand for Wintertraum, for over
I think I saw your pictures on Facebook.
Yeah, for across 3 days over Thanksgiving week, and
we were there. We were there in October during like Halloween stuff.
Yeah, so I was there for 3 days and with two friends, and we couldn't get enough of that ride.
Good.
And yeah. In fact, we rode that. We might have ridden that more than Taryn. Not it's close, but anyways, moving on.
Well, actually, just let me say. So I'll just say, like, even though I didn't love Fly, the Rookburg and the hotel, the theming, all of that stuff was just a 10 out of 10. Like, that was wonderful. No complaints. The ride was just too intense for me.
I get it. And the theming, I've said this before, including on the podcast, but the theming, when you combine the visual, the kinematics, the audio, everything, this may seem like a hot take, but in my opinion, that is the best themed land in the world. It trumps Disney. Well, easily trumps Disney, but even trumps Diagon Alley and what Universal's done. Even Super Mario, I've seen that in LA. Again, very impressive. But there's something, and I think what it is for me is when the theming is so good that it, one, creates an emotional response, which it always does for me walking in there, and two, where it's hard to see where the theming ends and Vekoma's mechanics begin, say with Fly. That's how well that, there's so much extra stuff in there mixed in, and it's blended seamlessly that it's just perfect theming.
I agree. It was amazing. Totally amazing.
Yes, absolutely. So moving on from talking about Phantasialand, as we oftentimes talk, or at least I oftentimes talk about on here, because it's my favorite park in the world. But what I'd like to ask you about now is kind of talk a little bit about your classes, your current classes you teach, and you were kind of talking about them a little bit earlier. So can you talk a little bit more about how you incorporate parks and coasters into your classes?
So I teach a lot of different courses. But the one class that focuses mainly on theme park stuff is called, well, it's been a special topics course for the last several years, and it was just called Theme Parks and Tourism. So I didn't make up the title. My department chairman made up the title. So I was like, okay, whatever you want. So I kind of teach about tourism, and then I teach about theme parks, sort of, and where theme parks fit in tourism. And now the course, I've morphed the course, and now it's called Theme Parks and Attractions Management.
Oh, okay.
So now I try to basically teach the business of theme parks. I love the history, so I do spend a lot of time talking about history of themed attractions, like where they come from and how long they've been around and that sort of stuff, and also the development of the industry over time. I like to give my students a taste. Like, a lot of my students, they're local to the New York area, so they haven't, not a lot of them have been to Europe, or not a lot of them have been to Disney World. My students come from a certain socioeconomic level. So, and I'm trying to, and I expose them to like, here, this is what it's like in Orlando. Why is Orlando or why is Orlando the way it is? So I tell them how Orlando developed and try to explain to them how the industry has changed over time. I introduce them to, here are the, a lot of them don't know all the theme, there's a whole geography of theme parks, obviously.
Right.
So I teach them about the world. I teach them about the United States, about the theme park world, where the parks are, who are the manufacturers of the parks. How do you operate a park? How does a park get built? How does a park make money? How does a park price? How does a park run food and beverage? How does a park, manage crowds? So it's really a survey course. My
Right.
theme parks and attractions manager, like what are theme parks? Why are theme parks? What do you, as a manager? Because I'm a business professor. How do you manage a theme park? So
Right.
that's that course. My newest course is Intro to Hospitality. So that's everything from cruises to
Hmm.
gaming to tourism in general to the travel industry to food and beverage. I spend a lot of time with food on the food and beverage stuff. Um, I give them I go to IAP, I spend the week at IAPA, so I give them a whole IAPA report. So I have a big dose of theme parks in the hospitality course as well. But the courses I teach, kind of the standard vanilla business courses I teach international marketing. So my travels to every corner of the universe really help me because I'll drag my wife into a supermarket and we'll spend an hour going through the supermarket looking at how they market consumer products
Right. Right.
supermarket in Spain or in Mexico or wherever. So that's really, and I take a ton of pictures that I can show my students. I take a ton of pictures in general. So this kind of illustrates all my stories. And then, so I teach international marketing, and then I also teach, my main course is strategic management. So that's basically things like SWOT analysis and, international, how to manage, how, sorry, it's a big complicated course is what it
Yeah.
is. It's like
Gotcha.
it's basically everything you've learned in business, HR, marketing, etc. And how do you put that all together and figure out how you're going to be the number one company in the next 5 to 10 years? So
Yeah.
it's long-term planning. It's a lot of external scanning and internal analysis. And I teach everything from, governance, what is a board of directors, to,
Right.
how do you raise money when you need to finance a big new factory or something.
Gotcha.
So that's what I teach.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, that's in a
All right.
nutshell.
Great. That's great. That's great. So, just out of curiosity, you mentioned in the hospitality course you teach about gaming. Do you mean like casinos?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't have any. My wife loves to gamble.
Yeah. Yeah. I
But
like
yeah,
casinos as well. But
yeah,
yeah.
it exactly. There's like a unit on casinos and cruises, and so it basically go like every aspect of hospitality, private clubs, country clubs,
Right.
restaurants,
Right.
chain restaurants, local restaurants, family restaurant. Like we look at, like, they learn about wine, they learn about beer, they learn about spirits. That's another broad survey, 100 level course. My dean really wants us to expand the hospitality thing. But it's hard. I don't know. Like, I'm spoiled because I taught at that hotel school in the Netherlands, and the students ran hotels, the students ran restaurants. They had like
Right.
a special wine room for learning about wine. I don't think my school is gonna invest those kinds of resources to start a hospitality program, but I guess you can teach some of this stuff in the classroom. So that's what we try to do.
Yeah. No. That's yeah. Sure. Sure. Can you share what school you are teaching at
Oh yeah,
currently?
sure. I'm at Farmingdale State College,
Oh,
which,
Farmingdale. Okay. Got it. Got it.
yeah, okay, yeah, it's part of the State University of New York system.
Yep. Yep. I know Farmingdale. Yeah. Yeah. Again, from New Jersey. So,
Yeah,
been to
right.
upstate New
So
York. And,
for listeners, it's smack dab in the middle of Long Island.
yep. 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 Great. That's great.
There's a theme
So,
park there. Adventureland is literally across the street, and that's probably why I took the job. In fact, I've had the guys from Adventureland. I know the owners of Adventureland, and I've had them as great guest speakers.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great.
They're
Great.
great guys.
So this actually may be a good segue to the next question, which is, can you share any favorite moments from teaching relating to, the couple of courses you mentioned that relate to parks and coasters? Any kind of cool moments?
I think the best moments are when I bring in guest speakers.
Yeah.
So I've had some really good guest speakers. Unfortunately, kind of COVID kind of, I got good guest speakers online also, and unfortunately,
Right.
I haven't gotten back to live guest speakers yet. So I haven't done anyway, but I've had great guest speakers. Adam Gross from Dippin' Dots came and spoke at one of my classes, and he brought Dippin' Dots for the class, so that was awesome. I had Bernie Campbell Bernie Campbell is from Whirly Drink Works. So I don't know.
Oh, yeah. I know Whirly. Yeah, from
Whirly,
IAPA. Yeah.
Whirly makes all of the fancy popcorn buckets and all of the refillable cups.
Yep.
And they're just an amazing company, and they really own the theme park space for souvenir cups.
Yep.
So Bernard Campbell is awesome. He's been the chair of the IAPA Food and Beverage Committee for the last 5 years or so, I think. So he's just a great connection to have. And whenever I'm at IAPA, I try to do F&B educational tours when they offer them. In fact, this shirt that I'm wearing that you can see is Coaster Coffee from SeaWorld in Orlando.
I recognize that. Yeah.
So I had a great tour from Anthony Stice when he was the VP of Food and Beverage for SeaWorld Entertainment.
Nice.
So that was a great tour, and he helped design this concept.
Nice.
And then I've had Tony Clark from Cedar Point.
Right.
I've had Dennis Spiegel, Mr. Theme Park. I don't know if you've heard of him. ITPS, International Theme Park Services. He was the first. Yeah, he was the first general manager of Kings Island.
Okay.
And he's an IAPA legend. So he's awesome, and he's a good friend. And then I think after he ran Kings Island, he went and helped open Kings Dominion. So he's been a consultant in the industry for decades.
Nice.
And then I had Kristen Reynolds she's the CEO of Discover Long Island, which is the local convention and visitors bureau. So she came and spoke, and then that New York Times reporter came to my class. So that was kind of a highlight to have a New York Times reporter and photographer in my classroom. So that was fun too. So it's a fun class.
Yeah, sounds fun. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Okay, so wrapping up our interview and discussion here, so Martin, next question I'd like to ask you, this is a kind of thought-provoking, kind of deep, probably the deepest question we ask. How would you like your family, your friends, your colleagues, your students, former students, to remember you by?
I have to say, Andrew, I'm kind of humble to a fault, and my sense of humor tends to be self-deprecating, and I've had colleagues criticize me to my face because they said you have to stop undercutting yourself when you and that's just
right. I see that. Yeah.
I'm just I have a bit of a Rodney Dangerfield kind of personality where I make a lot of fun of myself. So I have to say, like, if anyone remembers me at all, then I consider that a huge victory.
You'll be remembered.
And I joke with my students. I say, hey, don't say I never. I like to impart information. So if my students remember anything that I said, then that's a victory. Whether they remember it was from me or not, if they gain knowledge that becomes useful in their life, then that's how I want them to remember me.
That's great. They don't have to
remember me. They just have to do well.
Right. They have to remember they have to have a positive impact from you.
If they learn something from me that helps them in their life, then that's enough for me.
Mission accomplished right there.
Where it came from or not.
Yep, makes sense. Makes sense. So speaking of you influencing your students in a positive way, very great segue to our next question, our last kind of main question, which is what advice can you give those that are listening? Any final advice?
I would say that um, I think in terms of practical advice in life, and this is I have to admit that I don't necessarily follow my own advice, but my advice is to be a positive and optimistic person. That there's actually research that shows that the more optimistic you are about life, the better you do in life.
Right.
And being a gloomy Gus can actually hurt you. Not just everybody says what a grump, but it actually you end up having fewer successes in life because you miss opportunities and because you're not thinking, oh, something good could happen now. And there's a study, for example, where they did a study where everybody got like a newspaper and they were given a task that said, okay, if you count how many pictures there are in the newspaper, and it was like a fake newspaper, but count how
Right.
many pictures there are in the newspaper, and if you count them all correctly, you get $25, right? So, this is a kind of study they do in college campuses and stuff like that, right?
Right.
And but what but there were fake captions. It was a fake newspaper. So like one of the captions on the photos might say, the number of photos is 25, and if you and just you can stop the reading the newspaper now and collect an extra $100. And so the people who tended to be more optimistic and positive, they would see that and say, oh, and they would collect an extra $100 and get the
Right.
answer right away. And people who were more pessimistic about life, people who were kind of like more kind of Debbie Downer type people,
Right.
they would
Right.
just plod through and count all the things and so it's really being positive and being optimistic is more about seeing opportunities where other people may not. And that's a really useful skill to have. And then the other piece of info or the other advice I would give to people is you can actually spend time visualizing success. Like
Right.
when you visualize success, you're actually more prepared for when it happens, or you're more prepared for doing the thing that needs to be done. So I'll just give you an example. I was
Yeah.
I would when I my first job, my first academic job, like real academic job, professor job, I was teaching sport marketing
Uh-huh.
at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. And because I was writing a PhD on I wrote about logos in minor league baseball.
Yeah.
And so I got this job as a sport marketing professor, and I rented an apartment from one of my colleagues. He was a sports psychologist, and he would actually work with University of Tennessee athletes, and they would sit there and think through like being up at bat for like a baseball player, right? They would think about it, think about seeing the pitch, think about hitting the pitch, and it was actually shown to improve their performance on the field by thinking through the actions that they were going to take. And this was beyond actually practicing on the field. So I think that that's a useful skill to have, is thinking through what you need, what you're doing, so that you can see yourself succeeding at whatever you're doing.
Yeah, that's great advice. And that last one is actually kind of related to the second one you mentioned, about like, visualizing positivity, thinking about positive. It's sort of the going to a better level than what you were talking about earlier in the beginning of the interview about fear, where, and I talked about this, Chuck's referring to this as failure of the imagination.
Yeah.
That second piece of advice is about combating that failure, or like very common failure of the imagination, and force yourself to think about the realistic or positive outcomes of a given situation. So great advice there. Thank you. So lastly, Martin, if you could share anything you'd like to share in the way of any social media that you have that you'd like, people to connect to you with, any kind of public websites or anything where people can find more about you. Perhaps, just remind people how they can perhaps see what your courses are. For all you know, maybe, I don't know if your college allows people just to attend individual courses, or if they'd be enrolled in school for a full degree. But if they allow, people to attend just individual courses or online options, things like that, if you want to share anything about that, because I'm sure you might have some people interested in checking out your classes. So
sure. So it's farmingdale.edu, farmingdale.edu, and you can just you can look me up there, and you can look at the course guide, and you can see what courses are being offered, and you can see if I'm the instructor for those courses. And I occasionally I do teach an online course, like I will be in the spring, strategic management. I mean, we don't have a lot. I mean, yes, I think you can audit a course, which is basically
auditing,
matriculating, but taking the course. But I mean, we don't have a lot of auditors, but it's not unheard of.
Okay.
In terms of social media, I like to use LinkedIn, and you can find me at Marin Lewison on LinkedIn. And then I have about 100,000 photographs on Flickr, FLICKR.
Oh yeah.
.com, and it's all grouped by trip. So like China 2016, or San Diego 2021, whatever. So
right.
And it's a lot of theme park photos, and that's my handle is MILST1, which is basically Martin I. Lewison Student 1, because it's my old username from grad school, a zillion years ago. So I'm on Flickr. I mean, I think you can just look for Marin Lewison on Flickr. I'm there too. I mean, I have a YouTube. I've been doing some TikToks now and again. I have my brief review of Fly on TikTok.
Gotcha.
So I think it's Prof Roller Coaster, like Professor Roller Coaster. Prof Roller Coaster is my TikTok, but it's very, I don't make a lot of TikToks. It's fun, but I'm a busy guy. So
I can imagine,
yeah. And then the other place, actually, if you connect with me on LinkedIn and you're interested in the Themed Experience and Attractions Academic Symposium at IAPA, you can reach out to me there.
Great. That's people can message you. That's great. All right. Well, thank you very much, Martin, for sharing that. And thanks for talking to me today. It was a great conversation. You're obviously a very interesting individual and had some interesting experiences. And it's great how you tie in coasters and parks even into academics. And that's not something we see very commonly. So that's great for you to expand upon that and tell us about that. So thanks again.
The pleasure's been all mine. I'm sorry I went on too long at the beginning.
No, that's okay. You're fine. You're fine. It was just a lot for me to keep up with in the beginning, but no worries. You were good.
Yeah, you have. I apologize to you guys. Like there's so much content out there now on theme parks and roller coasters or whatever. And my wife, even though she's my traveling partner, and I know, she loves to go on roller coasters, she loves to travel, but she is not a nerd. She's not
Right.
I wouldn't call her a thuzy.
Right.
But she's obviously the love of my life. So, but sometimes, and we have friends that we travel with who are more nerdy, but sometimes I'm sitting around for months and I have nobody to talk to. So that's why I go online and say, somebody invite me on a podcast.
Gotcha.
And you guys, and I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Our pleasure. Thanks again, Martin.
If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. If you want to see more of us, we upload every Friday. Be sure to like us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. All at Coaster Challenge. Links are in the description below. Thanks for joining us here today.